the Pakatan Rakyat manifesto needs to be read in context with all the other documents, the policy documents that Pakatan Rakyat has produced since 2008. And this includes the Common Policy Framework, the Buku Jingga, the two alternative budgets that we have tabled in 2012 as well as 2011. Jadi manifesto rakyat ini bukan satu dokumen saja, tetapi mesti dibaca dengan keseluruhannya dengan dokumen-dokumen lain yang telah dikeluarkan oleh Pakatan Rakyat, termasuk buku jingga, tawaran jingga, kedua-dua alternatif budget yang telah dikeluarkan oleh Pakatan Rakyat di 2012 dan juga 2011 dan juga dasar umum Pakatan Rakyat or the Common Policy Platform. So this risalah actually summarizes the four main areas that Pakatan Rakyat will want to look at from the perspective of the manifesto. These are the things which we highlight because they are the most important. The things which are in the Buku Jingga, for example, are still important to us, but we decided to leave out some things because we felt that we need a little bit more of a fresher look at the current economic situation. And there are also things in Buku Jingga which has been updated in the Manifesto Rakyat because, for example, we were resisting the listing of Felda. We thought that that needed to be looked at, and now we can see that the Felda listing is almost back to the listing price, and there's been a lot of public pressure to support that price. Of course, now that Felda has been listed, we cannot follow exactly what was put in Buku Jingga, whereby we said that we will delay the Felda listing until a more appropriate time. So these are some of the areas in which we are focusing our attention on in the next 4 years, but also very concrete things that we can do in the next 100 days after Pakatan Rakyat forms the next government in Putrajaya. Okay, jadi ini adalah sedikit daripada priority Pakatan Rakyat selepas kami menjadi kerajaan di Putrajaya, insyaAllah selepas PRU 13, di mana policy ini adalah policy yang lebih updated kerana ada policy di Buku Jingga yang telah diganti dengan policy yang baru kerana perubahan ekonomi dan juga perubahan politik di negara kita ni. Okay, so one of the things under kesejahteraan rakyat which we want to highlight is the economic transformation that would suddenly become so loud. Okay, the economic transformation that will result from the abolishing of monopolies in this country, right? So we can see that hapuskan monopoli adalah satu daripada teras yang Pakatan Rakyat akan memberi tumpuan yang sangat mendalam, because we feel that only if we by abolishing monopolies, this is one of the ways in which we can make the country more competitive and also bring down cost of living for many of us in this country who are suffering because wages have not kept up with inflation, and at the same time the prices of goods and services have also been kept artificially high because of monopolies. Okay, I'd like to welcome Dr. Zul, so which means I can talk less now. Okay, kita mengalu-alukan kedatangan Dr. Zul, YB Dr. Zul, MP Kuala Selangor. Okay, the other thing that I like to talk about is also from a perspective of making sure that the people still have an adequate cost of living would be hapuskan AES, right? Tricia, can you go to the right? Okay, and also to emphasize the abolishing of PTPTN and the provision of free education. So let me just give you an example for AES. AES, now the fine is 300 ringgit per summons, and this has been privatized to 2 companies so that they can, they can get revenue from the people of Malaysia. To put it in context, 2 summons worth 300 ringgit is more than BRIM 1.0 and BRIM 2.0 of 500 ringgit. So for every 500 ringgit that the government gives through BRIM, you can actually take it back through 2 AES summons. Okay, I'd like to welcome Saudara Rafizi. Okay, so all these details can be obtained from the Pakatan Rakyat website and also various Pakatan Rakyat component parties websites, and you can download all these important information. This flyer will actually be distributed. It's just one page, so it summarizes all the 4 parts, important parts of the Pakatan Rakyat manifesto that needs to be distributed widely, that you need to tell your friends about, that presents the vision in a very compact and neat form of how Pakatan Rakyat will govern differently compared to Barisan Nasional. Okay, now I want to move on to my own presentation. Trisha, can you please put up the PowerPoint presentation? Okay, I'm going to talk about how we are going to pay for this, because a lot of people have asked. Yes, a lot of these programs are good. Banyak polisi ini adalah polisi yang baik, tetapi bagaimanakah Pakatan Rakyat akan menunaikan janji-janji seperti ini dengan membiayai kos-kos yang mungkin ada orang kata terlalu tinggi. So I'm going to show you that this is actually something which is very reasonable from an economic perspective, and I think Rafizi will also add further information that makes this argument a very sound one. Because you can read about all the promises that we've made in the manifesto, but I think it's important for us to realize that semua ni bukan janji-janji kosong. Kerana kita ada kemampuan untuk membiayai semua janji-janji yang kita telah menulis dalam manifesto rakyat. Right? So I'm going to quickly go through some numbers, and I hope that it will give you a better idea of how Pakatan Rakyat will pay for this manifesto. Because this is a question which a lot of people have asked. Many people in BN have attacked us for coming out with a manifesto that they accuse us of not being able to be fiscally sound. And a lot of people in the NGO community have also accused Pakatan of being populist and saying that we are irresponsible in providing a lot of these programs without showing that we can pay for it. Right? So I'm going to show you that we can actually pay for it. So this is a chart of the federal government budget since 2002. And perhaps not many of you would have seen the numbers before, but I'm just going to highlight some. In 2002, the government budget was about 100 billion. Right? Now in 2013, the budget is now 252 billion. Right? So it's increased by about 2.5 times. And the Malaysian government budget has actually, on average, increased by 8.7% every year since 2002. Right? So when we talk about the promises that we want to pay, that we've made, and how we're going to pay for them, you have to remember that we are operating in a climate where the budget always increases in terms of expenditure. Under Pakatan Rakyat, I think we would not be so reckless with our spending, as I will show you later. But the numbers need to be viewed in this context, that now we have a budget of about 252 billion ringgit. Right? So that's the first point I want to make. Okay. The second point, which Rafizi will elaborate later on, is that the promises in the Pakatan Rakyat manifesto comes up to about 45 or 46 billion. Right? This includes, for example, getting rid of the toll roads, will cost about 6 billion. Free education and getting rid of PTPTN will cost about 6 billion. Increasing all royalties to the 4 oil producing states will cost about 12.5 billion. These are some of the main items. And once we total all of them up, it comes out to about 46 billion. This is our current estimate. Obviously, when we come into power, the estimates may change. It may go up, it may go down, depending on negotiation power. For example, in terms of the toll road, the toll roads in which we are going to take back from the private operators, right? So the amount may seem very high, 46 billion ringgit, right? But what we have to realize is this: 45 billion ringgit that is averages out over 5 years. You can see the budget will actually continue to increase, even at a more conservative estimate of about 8%, right? We can see that the budget this should be 252. the budget will increase from 2013 until 2018 to about 370 billion ringgit, right? So our expenditure for all these items is averaged out over a number of years, which means that the percentage of the budget that our promises would consume becomes less over time, right? So now it's about 18.2% in 2013, right? Over time, as the budget increases, the percentage share of our spending promises would also decrease, right? So it will go down from about 18.2% down to about 12% of the total budget, right? So we have to remember that 46 billion ringgit, when we average it out, is actually quite affordable, especially when we look ahead in time, when the budget is going to be much larger than compared to what it is now. Right? So this is something which we need to emphasize, that our calculations are responsible, that it would not make the country go bankrupt because it only takes up, in 5 years' time, less than 1/8 of the expected budget. Right? That's an important point to make. Okay. This is a comparison that is important for us to consider, because a lot of people have said, you make all these promises, how are you going to pay for it? But the actual fact is, if you look at what the Barisan Nasional government has done in terms of past budgets, you'll see that in the past 4 years, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, the amount of money that the BN spent, which exceeded what they projected the budget would be, what they projected they were going to spend versus what they actually spent, amounted to about 44 billion ringgit, right? 44 billion ringgit. You can see the black line up here is the amount of actual expenditure. The grey line is the amount that the BN budgeted for, right? So only in 2009, because of the economic crisis in 2008, did the spending come in as less than what was projected, right? Projected spending was 208. The actual 206. The projected expenditure was about 206. The actual spending was a bit lower, right? You can see all the other years, the actual spending was way above that of the projected spending. So, for example, in 2008, the projected spending was 176. Actual spending was 195. So the BN said, I'm going to spend 177 billion, but I actually spent 195 billion, 18 billion more. So you have to ask yourself, if people are asking Pakatan, how can we afford to go and pay for our budget, our manifesto? Then the question should also go back to the BN. Look, you said that you will spend this amount, X amount in the past, but when you actually spend it, you actually spend much more compared to what you promised. Right? So whereas for us, we're actually being very honest about what we're going to spend, and we're going to keep to these figures, which we'll show you later. Okay, then the other thing that needs to be looked at, other than this, is to look at the spending promises of the BN in every budget that is proposed by the Minister of Finance. What I did was to look at all the new spending promises made by the BN in 2013, the latest budget that was proposed by Prime Minister Najib as Finance Minister. And I total up all the new spending that he announced. This is not old spending that was already ongoing, but this is new spending, right? And I added up all the numbers. It came up to 30 billion ringgit. 30 billion ringgit of additional new spending, right? So given the fact that there has been, I'll show you the details later, but I just want you to remember 30 billion worth of new spending, right? Which means that in every year, every single budget, you expect there to be new items that will be announced by any government, including Pakatan Rakyat government, right? So it's very natural for us to announce new ways of doing things. We want to announce new plans, new policies that's different from Barisan Nasional, that will benefit the people more. And our manifesto Rakyat gives you details on how we're going to do this, right? So the cost that we estimate is 45 or 46 billion. We have to remember that Barisan Nasional, every year, they also make announcements in terms of new spending, right? And the new spending in 2013, the 2013 budget, comes up to about 30 billion ringgit, right? 30 billion ringgit. You can see here, for the NKEA, it was estimated that they would spend an additional 3 billion ringgit. There are other plans that are put down here as well that I've extracted from the budget. For example, Bumiputra Financing Fund of 1 billion ringgit, a special building fund for schools amounts to 1 billion ringgit, a green technology financing scheme of 2 billion ringgit, and the details go on. There are 56 new items which BN announced in the 2013 budget, which amounts to about 30 billion ringgit, right? So when BN says, look, how are you going to pay for all these new plans? Then the question should also go back to the BN. Look, you've announced every year in every single budget new plans to spend on new things, right? And for this last budget, it amounted to 30 billion ringgit, right? So what is so wrong for Pakatan Rakyat to also announce our manifesto is not a budget, but a lot of components in there includes new ways of spending money that we think are much more responsible compared to the BN, right? So the BN did announce 30 billion ringgit of new spending in the 2013 budget, but this does not include contingent liabilities. Basically, spending that the BN will use, the BN government would go and spend, but they don't put on the budget, right? As opposed to us, what we've done in the manifesto is we've outlined certain promises, and later Rafizi will show that these costings are all put up front for everyone to see. It is not off-budget items, not like what the BN is doing. For example, the contingent liabilities, basically expenditure that the BN has made or is going to make, but is not reflected in the budget, right? So what they do is that they set up special purpose vehicles to go and borrow money from the federal government, and then with the implicit assumption that this will be paid back to the federal government, and these special purpose vehicles then goes to lend to corporations like MRT Corp, corporations like 1MDB, corporations like Prasarana, and this would then fund a lot of infrastructure projects done by the federal government. All this money does not appear in the federal budget. So for example, the financing cost of the MRT project, which may come up to 100 billion ringgit, does not appear anywhere in the federal budget, right? Whereas we are very honest about our numbers. We say this is what we're going to spend. We don't say we are going to set up a special purpose vehicle just to pay for the plus bonds without telling you that this is actually the cost that we're going to pay for, right? Everything is very transparent. We tell you what the costs are, right? So if you think about it, 30 billion ringgit of additional spending on the part of BN in the 2013 budget, plus 20 billion increase in the amount of contingent liabilities from 2010 to 2011. In 2012, the final figure hasn't come out yet, but I think it would easily exceed this by another 20 to 30 billion ringgit. So all these additional spending costs that the BN has put off the budget also needs to be accounted for. Whereas for Pakatan Rakyat, we are very transparent about how we are going to carry out our policies. Okay, and the MRT project may end up costing 100 billion ringgit. Rafizi has revealed some scandals associated with the tendering process for the LRT project, right, which runs into hundreds of millions, if not billions of ringgit. One of the things that we promised in our manifesto is to relook at the contract for the MRT project and to try to, as much as possible, reduce the cost associated with the MRT project. Just to give you an example, the Penang government recently announced a state-funded road and undersea tunnel project in the state of Penang that's going to be totally funded by the state. Initially, it was supposed to cost 8 billion ringgit, right? It involves undersea tunnel from Seberang to Georgetown, and also includes three or four interchanges as well as expressways on the island of Penang. The initial cost was supposed to be 8 billion, but because of an open tender process that the state government went through, it went down from 8 billion to 6.3 billion. So the state government actually saved 1.7 billion ringgit from this project. Almost a quarter of the cost were reduced as a result of this open tender system, right? This is something that we will do if we are in power to reduce the cost of the MRT project. Okay, So let me just give you one example in terms of how we can reduce costs, reduce spending costs, looking at the Ministry of Education, which is the largest ministry in terms of government allocation. Right? You can see as of 2011, the Ministry of Education gets about 17% of the total budget of 36 billion. It used to be much more, it used to be about 24%, but this was before the Ministry of Education was split into higher education, KPT, and also the current Ministry of Education, which is pre-tertiary education. Right, so in 2011, the budget allocation was 36 billion. In 2013, the budget allocation is 39 billion. 39 billion is close to about 18% of the budget allocated in 2013. Right, so this is what the preliminary National Education Blueprint. These are the figures from the preliminary National Education Blueprint, which shows that from 2006 to 2010. About 18 billion ringgit worth of development expenditure was spent on our schools in Malaysia, right? On our schools, 18 billion ringgit. This is not a small amount of money, and this is the outcome. There were 9,667 schools in 2005. There were about 10,000 schools now, in Malaysia. What happened in terms of 18 billion worth of spending? The number of schools with no 24-hour electricity was reduced from 8% to 3%, a reduction of 5%, so at least there were some results. No clean water. Schools with no clean water and no two-session schools only decreased by 1%. Only decreased by 1%. There's still 15% of schools in Malaysia that doesn't have any clean water. In terms of schools without computer labs, no computer labs at all, just 2%, a decrease of 2%, right? And computer spending in the Ministry of Education comes up to about 2 billion ringgit for every 5 years, right? No science lab, increased actually from 17% to 20%, right? So despite spending 18 billion ringgit, the number of schools without a proper science lab actually increased by 3%. This is the finding of the National Education Blueprint. It is not something that we created ourselves. These are the numbers from the Ministry of Education, right? The reason why there are so many of these wastages, I won't go into the details, but you can read some of these projects, which are basically failed projects and also wasted projects from the National Auditor's Report. Every year they come up with something that is very, very shocking. It's not just 63,000 ringgit binoculars, which of course is very bad, but we're talking about projects in the millions of ringgit. How, for example, an 8 million ringgit solar project for rural schools, which a lot of it was spent in Sabah, right? I think that's a good idea in terms of wanting to give electricity to many of these schools, but what happened? All the projects were delayed and extended by at least 200 days, and when they did this audit, about 42% of the 58 schools had non-functioning or broken solar projects. Right, so this is 800 million ringgit. We can go on to another one, talks about school computer lab project. 215 million ringgit spent in Peninsular Malaysia, 160 million spent in Sabah. Right, and remember what I said about the computer labs just now. Only 2% decrease. Right, this is one of the reasons why. 27 labs in Sabah not done in time, only 2 of 300 day school labs in Sabah completed, and then the non-tender works are twice as expensive as the tender works. So you can see in the Ministry of Education, there's so much wastage that goes on, in a budget that's almost 40 billion ringgit, right? So the kind of stuff that we're talking about here is actually relatively minor compared with the total allocation of the Ministry of Education. This is a figure given by the World Bank. The World Bank basically compared what the projected expenditure was from an operational expenditure perspective from the Ministry of Education versus what they actually spent. And in 2010, you can see the difference was about 10%, right? So imagine if, let's say, I say I'm going to spend 1 billion ringgit, right? I end up spending an additional 100 million ringgit. So if, let's say, the budget was 40 billion ringgit, I spend another 4 billion ringgit. This is on top. Over and on top of what was budgeted for. And this can all be attributed to the kind of wastages that I showed you earlier, that was highlighted by the National Auditor. Okay. And this is not just restricted to procurement and physical infrastructure. It also has got to do with the lack of open tender for services as well. So recently, our Minister of Education, Tan Sri Muhyiddin, went over to the US to receive an honorary doctorate, right? Honorary doctorate from a sports school in Mississippi, in the United States. What was not revealed was the fact that this school, which gave him the honorary doctorate, was given a RM23 million training project to provide sports diplomas to our PE teachers, or those underqualified PE teachers. 23 million ringgit. And what we found out was that this sports diploma isn't actually even a diploma. It's basically a certificate that does not have the same level as a diploma, which means that all the civil servants, all the teachers who undergo this training, they won't be able to receive a wage increase because the diploma is not, a certificate level course does not give you the same kind of entitlements to a diploma. But the result was our Minister of Education now can call himself a doctor, and at a cost of 23 million ringgit to the taxpayer. So this is very important. It's not just the billions of ringgit in procurement, but also the billions and millions of ringgit in services and contracts that are not awarded transparently in the Ministry of Education. So imagine, if let's say Pakatan Rakyat comes into power, if we just eliminate the 10% overspending in terms of the operational budget, we can save about 3.6 billion a year. If we reduce the wastages by about 20% from this budget, for the Ministry of Education budget alone, we can save another 7.2 billion ringgit. So it totals up to almost 10 billion ringgit that we could save just from one ministry alone. Right? I think Rafizi will give you a figure slightly higher in terms of the cost savings. I'm giving you a very conservative estimate. And all these savings we can actually use to put into the other, the new programs and new policies that Pakatan Rakyat has promised in the manifesto Rakyat. So it's important for us to remember these three things before I end, that we can keep to our promises, our spending promises in the manifesto Rakyat, because every government has new promises that they will have to announce. Every year the budget would increase by a certain amount, that this budget would go, part of this budget will go into our spending patterns, and finally and most importantly, we can decrease wastage, we can decrease corruption. Even from one ministry alone, we can see that we can decrease it by 10 billion ringgit. And that money can be channeled into the programs that are going to be implemented under Pakatan Rakyat government. Right? So I'm just going to end here. If you have any questions, we can follow up later. Thank you very much.